3.
The place where I worked at was a tomato plantation. I was a security guard there. I was the graveyard shift guard, and my shift was from 11 PM until 7 AM to the next day. We usually had to do a walk around the site every 2 hours. The site I worked at had 2 plants and 5 different gates. This plant is pretty much in between 2 small towns out in the middle of nowhere. Both towns are about 15 minutes from the site. I used to smoke before going on my rounds, and it was around 2:40 AM, almost time for my next round. I decided to light up before starting my 3rd round. I light my cigarette, take the first puff, and exhale. I used to love that first puff. I've since quit though, almost 2 years now, but anyone who smokes knows that that first puff is the best. Anyway, I'm standing outside the guard shack, watching the occasional car pass by, wondering where they're going at this time of night. It was a pretty warm April night. I didn't even have my jacket on. All I had was my long sleeve shirt underneath my security shirt. I'm halfway done with my cigarette when I hear what sounds like someone laughing. I thought it was strange, but then just thought it might be the birds or something. I heard it again. So I checked my phone inside the guard shack because I was watching something on Netflix, but it was still paused. I thought to myself, what the fuck? And had chills run up my spine immediately. I took another puff and heard some more laughing and realized that it was coming from around the guard shack in the field behind it. It sounded like little kids. I want to say I said screw this and went inside, or I'm not even going to look. But nope, I figured let's have a look. I peek around the corner and see these 2 kids playing in the middle of the field. It creeped me the hell out. I seriously got chills running down my whole body. But that wasn't the worst part. That would have been easy to deal with that night. I just kind of stared at them for a few seconds because I couldn't really believe if I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. 2 little kids playing out in the middle of a field in the middle of nowhere. I want to say early 20th or late 19th century clothes, and they were really pale. But the creepiest part was that you could only see from the waist up. I couldn't see their lower body. I'm not sure if they realized that I was staring at them or what, but they were laughing and then they just turned and looked at me, still smiling, but all they had were creepy black eyes. There was nothing there. Emptiness. Just blackness. All this seemed like it took forever, but honestly, it couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes. I threw my cigarette on the ground and didn't even stomp on it. I went inside the guard shack and locked it. I closed the blinds to the windows that I could. I texted my wife to see if she was awake because she would usually stay up on the weekends with our older kids. When she didn't respond, I called a few times, but then I remembered it was almost 3 in the morning. She was most likely passed out. I don't scare easily, but for whatever reason, that night I almost left and thought of just coming back around 6 in the morning before the next guard came for his shift. I had been at this place for 3 years. I'd heard of the stories of ghosts. I've known about the deaths there. I had known about the employees that had passed on that would show up and walk around the plant. They didn't bother me. But this was different. These 2 little kids were something more than just a ghost. Never before and never since have I seen or heard of them. I didn't end up coming home, but I didn't do my next round or any other round for the rest of my shift either. I just sat there and watched Netflix for the rest of my shift.
Number 2.
I worked in fast food during high school and when I started college. I was a fairly small 18-year-old girl at the time, and I was scheduled to close the restaurant that night at midnight. We had been particularly dead, and labour cost was pretty high, so at about 9:30 I was the only one left up in front while my manager took drive-through orders and money. So around 9:30ish, this guy walks in wearing really nice designer clothing, including a brand new looking jacket with the hood up, pressed khaki shorts and sunglasses. He keeps all of this on as he sits down at the bar style seats at the end of the counter. This raises immediate red flags for me because, being dark outside, I feel like the guy is keeping his sunglasses on and hood up to obstruct my view and the camera's view of his face. I hesitantly stand there, unsure of what to do. I pretend to be busy and wait for him to say something. And sure enough, in a few minutes, he's behind me at the counter.
"Excuse me, ma'am, but what could you give to me?"
"I'm sorry?"
"You know, when the food expires, I know it's not really bad. Could you get me something?"
This guy has still not taken off the glasses, and when he speaks, he does so slowly. When he opens his mouth to talk, I notice that he's missing most of his teeth, despite the fact that he's a very young man. "I'm sorry, I really can't. My manager needs everything to count the waste products. I can get you a glass of water though." He accepts, half smirking. I hand him the water cup and dip behind the grill to find my manager. She seemed thoroughly unconcerned and told me to go back up front and get to work. Uneasy, I oblige. I continued to busy myself up front and I see the guy sitting there at the counter again, sipping water and watching me behind his sunglasses. I duck back onto the side of the grill, not visible from the counter, and pull out my phone to text my boyfriend and father, both of whom who live close by, trying to get someone to keep an eye on the situation. I'm one word into my first text when my manager clears her throat behind me. I turned around and she has her hand out, waiting for me to put the phone in it. "I'm trying to get someone out here to make sure nothing happens. I'm actually pretty scared." "You're fine. Give me the phone. You can have it back for music when the restaurant closes." Helpless, I surrender my phone and the only chance for rescue I had. I come back to the front and he sits there for a while, staring, with a weird half smile on his face. About 11:30, he gets up and walks out. Relieved, I go on with my closing duties and forget about him. We close and get ready to leave the restaurant. I didn't have a car of my own, so my boyfriend would come to pick me up at 12:30 in the morning. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, from around the corner of the building, I saw movement headed my direction, and I quickly jumped into my boyfriend's car. As soon as I touched the door handle, the movement immediately changed direction and headed the opposite way. I locked my car door, realizing who the person in the shadows was and what the intention was. It was the same guy that had sat in the lobby earlier, watching me. I fully believe he intended to wait for me and follow me out to my car, believing that I had driven myself. I told my boyfriend to step on it.
Number 1.
So let me start off by saying I move around a lot in between Southern California and Arizona. At the time of this, I was still living in Southern California at my grandma's apartments. I had gotten a seasonal job at Toys R Us to do something with my time and to learn some people skills. I'm a 24-year-old girl and have some pretty extreme social anxiety and find it really hard to talk to people, so I figured this job would help. Another important thing to mention, my grandmother is on a government program with reduced housing cost and has a 2-bedroom apartment ever since my grandfather passed, but due to the annual check at her complex, she is supposed to be the only inhabitant of her dwelling, so technically I was not supposed to be living there with her, but she liked the help and the company, and I liked being rent-free. Now, since I wasn't supposed to be there, I technically had to sneak around and most definitely could not park on the parking grounds because the complex as it was would draw attention. There was a cemetery across the street from the complex, and then half a mile of houses leading down the street next to the cemetery, along with most of the visitors for the houses nearby parked. I was getting free rent and staying with my grandma, which was awesome to me, even if it meant I had to usually park half a mile away from the complex. I didn't mind the walk. So all was well for a few months from when I got the job in October, minus a scary incident with a stalker at work. Eventually, they started putting me on night shifts, which I didn't mind since I tend to be a night owl anyway. Also, if you've ever been on closing shift at any retail store, you'll know that you can easily stay an hour or two overtime after the store closes doing reshop during the holiday season. It was early December at the time, so I ended up getting off work past 2 AM. Around this hour, at this time of year in this part of Southern California, the mist gets pretty unbearably thick, to the point of having to drive 30 miles per hour down a freeway with brights on, and still being unable to see a foot or two in front of your car. Tonight was one of those nights. I wasn't too bothered by it at that time, but it does set off my anxiety a little. So by the time I got home, and it took me nearly 20 minutes to find a parking space, I was pretty anxious. And of course, with my luck, I parked at the very end of the half-mile stretch. Now, it's kind of a tradition of mine to get out of the car, close the door and linger near my car for a minute while I audibly stretch a bit and sometimes complain. It's just a little habit thing that I do, and tonight was no different. After I did this, I tucked my purse under my arm, turned on my phone flashlight and stuck it in front of my face to see where I was going because the fog was so thick and I couldn't see a foot in front of my face. I had walked in this weather many times before, so I knew my way home. A straight shot walk for half a mile and a sharp turn left at the end of the cemetery, then crossing the street and into the gated complex. So I was on my merry way until I heard it. A loud, almost obnoxious cough and footsteps. My alert mode set in and I instantly started walking faster and trying to be quieter about my movements. Call me paranoid, but I've had a fair number of let's not meet moments, and I certainly wasn't keen about meeting the stranger walking behind me, especially given the fact that I can't even see a foot in front of my face, even with the streetlights and my phone flashlight on. This continues for a few minutes, with an occasional cough behind me, and then I hear a whistle. The kind catcallers do, which bewilders me because 1. You can't see shit, and 2. Since you can't see shit in this weather, I assume the person is purposely intimidating me, at which point I give up on walking and break into a run. The steps behind me break into a full-blown run, and I hear panting. Clearly the dude isn't in the best shape. By now I'm speed walking next to the cemetery, and for some god-forsaken reason, my panicked mind tells me it would be better to duck into the cemetery and hide instead of walk the straight shot home. Had there been no fog, I would have a clear view of my grandma's apartment from the area in the cemetery where I stood. I quickly hid by crouching behind the entrance post to the cemetery gates, and I knew I fucked up because his footsteps stopped too, and I could tell he knew I was hiding because of my lack of audible footsteps. I crouched there for what seemed like 10 minutes, too scared to turn on my phone for fear of him being close enough to see the light and me, and too scared to make a run for it for fear that he was intently listening out for me. I had figured out that he was standing probably 5 or 10 feet from where I was at the entrance driveway to the cemetery right before the gates, which was confirmed when, after minutes, I heard his voice say,
"I know you're there, sweetheart."
I heard the distinct sound of a lighter being struck and then smelled cigarette smoke. I figured the dude was focused on his cigarette, and I made a run for it across the cemetery, somehow not tripping over any graves, all while intently trying to listen behind me. The cemetery's main entrance has wrought iron fencing, but the back and right end is wooden and serves as a separator between the cemetery and the backyard of various houses. And the other side, which is in front of my grandmother's apartment, is chain link. There is no other entrance or exit to the cemetery, but I know the chain link fence doesn't go all the way to the ground, so I laid on my stomach, pushed the fence out and up, wriggled across and ran directly across the street to my grandma's house, pounding on her door until she opened. I don't know how this dude found me. He must have been standing around nearby as I parked and heard me complain to myself loudly when I got out of the car. But either way, that was one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. G'day mates, it's be.busta here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys, and I guess you could say that the dude that was out of shape that was chasing that girl in the cemetery, it was lucky that he didn't have a coffin fit. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all here, and I hope you're all really doing well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And as always guys, keep them coming, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also, please do me a favour and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with a short written statement of consent just so that I can be above board with everything. Also, remember to tell me in the email if you would like to remain anonymous, and please change any names if you don't want particular names to be shared. As always guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for updates throughout the week. You can also catch me on my second channel, all of which have links in the description below. Thanks again for always tuning in guys, and for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.